Hey, friends, I know you're getting an awful lot of Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt these days. That has a lot to do with just schedule and interest level and some of the rest. And sometimes I just can't hold back. And here's a great conversation I had with the Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt official astronomer and astrophysicist, Paul Wallace, who's going to be in town for an event, if in Minneapolis anyway, going to be in Minneapolis for an event with youth ministers on science and faith. And you can find out more information about that over at scienceym.org. That's Science Youth Ministry, the YM, scienceym.org. And it's a cheap event with smart people saying interesting things, and you might want to be part of it. $99, I think, is this 2-day event with Paul Wallace and other people in the science space. A guy named Science Mike, Krista Tippett, meteorologist, local. Anyway, but that's not why I was talking to Paul. I just think if you like him and you're like, I really want to know that guy, should I go to Atlanta to meet Paul where he teaches, or should I come to Minneapolis? Well, come to Minneapolis and, I don't know, meet both of us. So anyway, here it is, my conversation. I wanted to reach out to Paul because this data was released about stars, and I am so fascinated by the sky and stars and feel like I don't know as much as I want to know. So here's our conversation about stars. It spins around. Hey, everybody. Doug Pagitt here, and astrophysicist Dr. Wallace. Hey, we're going to talk about stars, my friend.
Stars. Even one at a time?
Yeah. Should we go through all 1.7 billion of them?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this big thing happened last week when I heard this news report that there was all this new data, new information about a whole lot of new stars that they know about in the world. And I immediately thought, I wonder what Paul would say about that. So I wanted to ask you and how we should think about this, because every time there's big star news, some of us get all excited. Our brains sort of open up and we say, oh, stars are the greatest.
They are the greatest. In fact, I just came out of a class and we were supposed to cover the Doppler effect, which we did sort of. But we started talking about redshift and the expansion of the galaxy and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I never actually got to the material because they asked so many questions about the cosmos and the expansion and galaxies and the Big Bang. So I didn't even cover the stuff because stars, they want to know about what's up there.
Yeah. And, okay. So for those of us who didn't keep up on the latest of this, what was discovered, or what was the data that came back last week?
Yeah, it wasn't so much a single discovery as it was a really thorough survey.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like what if foresters could know about every tree on the planet?
Wow.
Could know details about every tree. Imagine, now we don't know about let's say, put it this way, what if foresters could know everything about every tree in Alberta? That would be a lot of information about every tree in the province of Alberta. That would be huge. It's sort of the same sort of thing here. I mean, it's not like we discovered a special star.
Okay.
What it is that we did a really thorough survey of I did it.
Yeah, right. You and your star physicists.
Yeah, me and my people. We did this, and we surveyed 1.7 billion stars, and we learned a lot of information about them. So we have a pretty exhaustive set of information for many, many, many stars. I mean, that's a billion now, not a million, a billion. So 1.7 billion.
1.7 billion. I heard someone in an interview say, she was new in her career, it sounded like, and she said, I will spend the rest of my professional life dealing with this data.
Yeah, right. And multiple careers could be spent on it.
Wow.
I believe. And basically what we've done is opened up, it's basically like a huge mine that we can now go down inside and just dig stuff out of. Certainly new kinds of stars will be discovered, for one thing. Stars that don't fit in any of our little boxes that we've already got. There's all kinds of stars out there. I mean, they're all essentially the same in some level, like people are all essentially the same on some cosmic level, but they're different kinds. And certainly new kinds of stars will be discovered from this.
So where did the data come from? What was it that produced this?
It was a satellite. It was the Europeans that did it, actually. And European Space Agency, sort of Europe's equivalent of NASA, set this thing up, and it's been decades in the making, called Gaia. Can't remember what the acronym stands for, and basically it took information, like I got a list here. It took information of positions in the sky where the stars are, where they're located, magnitude, that's how bright they are, how bright they appear, and how bright they actually are, how far away they are, how fast they're moving through the sky. Here's something that you might know.
I'm quite sure I didn't know it. Whatever you're about to say, I'm pretty sure I did not know.
Science fan. But if we could go out and watch the sky over time, over like the next 100,000 years, we would see all the constellations that we know moving and changing around. The stars are swarming like bees. All we've got really right now is during our lifetimes is a snapshot of where the stars are.
Huh.
So they're moving in all sorts of different directions. Some are moving in groups, some are not. But that motion is called proper motion. And we've gotten proper motion information on how many stars? Proper motion information on 1.3 billion. So only 1.3 billion. Their temperatures, and also information on the dust and gas that is between them and us. There's a lot of stuff in the galaxy that's not stars. It's dust and gas and all kinds of junk like that. And by the starlight, as it passes through this dust and this gas, it changes in such a way that we can learn about that dust and gas. So we have information on 87 million stars that cover that information. So it's a big data set.
Okay, so that satellite, how long has it been up there? How long has it been collecting this data? Like, what does it take to get?
I don't know. I don't actually know the number of years. I'm guessing between 5 and 8 years now, something like that.
So it's been gathering up this data, or did it take that long for the data to be received? Like, was it a time lag in when it was sent?
It sends it down as it collects it. I don't know how many gigabytes we get a day from it, but it sends it down as it collects it. So this has been collected over years. And
then whoever's collecting this released that data to researchers. That's what happened.
That's exactly it. It was made public. That's why.
Oh, it was made public. Okay. All right. All right. So that helps.
Doug Pagitt, if you could learn some astronomy and dig through this data and publish your papers.
That's all I need to do, right? I could just if I found that proper website, I could download that Excel file and just writing my papers.
You got the idea.
All right. So, what do you think we're going to know, or what do people already know about this data that my great grandchildren will look back and say, "Boy, in the early 21st century, here's what they thought about stars, but now we know this." What do you think this is going to tell us? That there's more of them, that they're cooler or brighter?
No. The temperatures is one thing that we actually have down pretty well. I think that what might come out of it is a whole new ideas about how they evolve. Because stars have lifetimes. They're born, they have lifetimes. Luckily, our sun is, right in the midlife. It's halfway through its life right now, and then they die. And then where they die depends on how massive they are, basically.
Oh.
And that process is known as stellar evolution. And I think we're going to learn a lot about stellar evolution from this. A lot.
Stellar evolution meaning
stellar evolution.
Stellar meaning the stars, the evolution of things in space.
Yeah, when I talk about evolution, in a biological sense, I'm talking about entire species of creatures and so forth and extinctions. But when I say stellar evolution, I'm talking about how mostly how individual stars go through their life cycle.
Wow.
So our sun, for example, has about an 8 to 10 billion year life cycle, and it's somewhere right in the middle of that, right? I mean, lifespan, and it's somewhere right in the middle of that right now.
So is this data that we're receiving, is this going to tell us, hey, we were right about how long our sun has and where we are? Or is this data, do you think, going to tell us, hey, the sun's about to burn out?
It could potentially adjust it, but it's not going to. I think our meeting next week will still happen.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do I have anything? Do I have to make my mortgage payment?
Your summer vacation is probably still safe, for example.
All right.
But yeah, it could tell us that we're off by 500 million years or something. Yeah.
Do you think any of this will show us new? This is all about the Milky Way galaxy, right?
Yeah, this is about the Milky Way galaxy is about 100,000 light years, 100,000 now side to side. This data reaches out about 25,000 light years from us. So we haven't collected it for the whole galaxy, just for our sort of quadrant. Think of it that way.
Would it tell us anything about there being other life out there at all, or places for life, or is it not going to study planets and jazz?
I don't think it could do that. I think it'd have to do some sort of chemical analysis of the atmospheres, and you have to find planets, and that's a whole different game. Finding planets is a whole different. This is all really just about stars, but also anything that gives off light was looked at. So distant galaxies are in this, asteroids, close up asteroids, things like that.
Wow.
So it's a lot of information.
And I had heard, I don't know if this is true, I think I'd heard this, a lot more stars than they thought there were previously. Is that true, or is it we just know more about the stars that we always knew?
I think it's a matter of knowing more about them than it is that there are more of them. As far as I know, I think it's just a matter of knowing more about the stars that are already there than realizing that there are actually, we're not discovering, I don't think there's more, that we think there's more stars in the galaxy.
I guess I didn't.
The galaxy has between maybe a couple 100 billion stars in it. It's it's a lot. It's an impressive number.
Okay,
so this is only a 1% really.
Yeah. Okay, so hang on a minute. I was about to say I didn't. This is how little I know. I was about to say I didn't know that there were 1.7 billion stars, and you're saying no. Actually, there's a couple of 200 billion
in our galaxy.
In our galaxy,
and there are hundreds of billions of galaxies. So you can't. I mean, it's just at some point it becomes overload, it becomes overkill, and you lose sense of how big the numbers really are. Basically.
Yeah. It is stunning.
Yeah, it surely is.
What you're talking about. How much of that do you think is useful?
Am I dropping out a little bit?
No. How much of that do you think is useful for people and for all of us?
Useful.
Yeah, like what this data that comes back, what useful for scientists, useful for people like me to think about the galaxy, or I don't know.
Useful, I don't think so. Useful in a that means practical to me, and and one of the great appeals to astronomy to me actually is its great impracticality. But on that being said, we never know what we're going to need to know in the future. You never do know what you're going to need to know. So, but use, I can't think of off the top of my head any use. But when they invented the laser, they couldn't think of any use for it either. So
really,
yeah. The guy who invented it, Charles Towns, was like, well, it's a nice little optical effect, but who can say what it could ever be useful for? That now we entertain our cats with it.
I had a wart taken off my foot with a laser the other day.
Well, did you? There you go.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it felt, as a 51-year-old, it felt like this is now the world that as a child I thought was going to be available. I would go to the doctor, and they would say, as my dermatologist did, take him down to the laser room. She said to
so you were like, yes.
I was like, I'm going to the laser room. And then they pointed a laser at my foot, and she said to me, this is going to hurt a bit. And then it hurt a whole lot.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, the only part about that is going to hurt a bit was it didn't hurt a bit. It hurt a whole lot. But I was so enthralled with the idea that I was having laser surgery. I'd previously had laser surgery on my eyes, which for some reason I just call vision correction. But this felt like the real deal. So I can't imagine someone wouldn't have known what a laser would be good for, fixing my eyes.
Yeah. Well, you never know what you're going to need to know, but for the most part, it's not an immediate practical payoff. I'll put it that way.
Is this what makes people who doubt science or don't want to fund science and have these fights in the United States about this? Is this part of what makes it hard for people to support science? Is that we have a sense in the United States that everything should have an immediate practical response?
Yeah, and I'm afraid that the middle of the 20th century was not that way. I do fear for that, because I do think that basic research is absolutely critical. People discover just by doing basic exploratory research, the benefits of that are enormous. And I don't know how many hundreds of things I could point to that would prove my point. But I do believe that it's short-sighted just to simply look for things that can pay off in a very immediate, very bottom line kind of way. I think that's really short-sighted.
Yeah.
And the government and research in general is going that way. The government's less and less interested in funding real fundamental research anymore.
Do the people who work in the star world here in the United States feel a little saddened that this was a European investment in this?
I don't think so. I don't think so. There's so much goodwill, I think, between American scientists and European ones that I don't think that's really the case. But I do think that these kind of projects for the United States might be in the future threatened because they don't have an immediate practical financial payoff. And I think it stunts us a bit when we don't try to explore. I mean, we should explore. It's sort of who we are, and I think it kills something in us when we, as a species, stop doing it.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
you know what I mean. I think we have this sort of inward turn towards, immediate needs, and we forget about the universe we live in, and I think there's a spiritual. And there's a spiritual dimension to it. But I think it's lost when all you're trying to do is put out the next fire or build the next can opener.
the next wart removal system.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Grow taller basketball players, whatever.
Now, I know you're going to be here in Minneapolis talking about spirituality and science and so on, but say a little bit more about what you mean by this idea that there's something spiritual that gets lost when we...
I don't know. I think there's an innate human desire to know, to understand, and I think that has as a Christian, I think that has a spiritual dimension to it. I think that it's a way of connecting with reality and therefore with God. And when that gets cut off, I think something dies. I think when that sort of process, which I think is really important to us as human beings, gets cut off, I think that it kills a little bit of wonder, a little bit of mystery, and a little bit of humility, I think, that comes with not knowing. You know? That's what I think about that. I think it's a loss. I think it's a tragic loss, and not just from a strictly scientific, narrow scientific point of view, but from a human point of view.
That the exploration of science and so on, and the understanding of what we know is essential to the human endeavor. Right.
I think it's a way of connecting with God. Yeah, I do. And connecting with reality. And the more reality we get, the better. And it's just a way of seeing the world that is threatened. It's a way of approaching the world and of interacting and of being real in the world that is threatened.
Yeah.
When all we're trying to do is to build the next thing that's going to make money or whatever. And I have no problem with people like, Elon Musk. He's not doing natural science, but he is. I've got that in common with him. He's got a different way of exploring. He wants to put people on Mars. He wants to move us through those tubes, and get us around faster. But he's got the same kind of forward vision and creative impulse that I think drives science as well. And that sort of thing is harder and harder to come by.
Do you feel like there is, I don't know how to say this idea of the human project, right? The idea that there's this human endeavor that people should be, that we should all be involved in. Do you feel like that is, do you feel like that's put in jeopardy by the idea of usefulness? Is that what you're saying? That there's something lost in the usefulness demand that we miss out on, or that we?
No, but I guess I think it's a both and thing and not an either or thing.
Okay.
I have no problem with people trying to solve practical problems. Of course, we have climate change. We have all kinds of things that demand practical solutions. We have organizations that work on those things. But there is a certain sort of dreaming, to use sort of a fanciful word, that drives science and that drives fundamental research. And I don't think those are either or. I think that they can exist together. And I think that we as a nation are able to fund both of those things, to do both of those things on big, ambitious scales, while at the same time attending to the needs of, the immigrants and the marginalized. I think we can do it. I think we can do it. I don't think it's science versus, I don't think science budgets need to eat into budgets, social budgets,
right,
and vice versa. We have enough to do both if we're willing to do both.
Yeah, because it seems to me, and the reason I like talking to you about this stuff so much is that there's something that fuels the imagination when you start thinking about things that are so big and so mind-opening, and it just feels like it's the long-term activity of humanity to think like that and to do that. But I also, I do that with philosophy and big ideas.
You can do it art, or you can do it however.
Yeah.
There's other ways to do it. I saw it in my students' faces just a little while ago. I was talking about the Big Bang. I was talking about the expansion of the universe. And it's just such a, all of a sudden they were transported into a place which is both seems fanciful, but it's entirely real at the same time.
Right.
And they just lit up, and they didn't want to go back to the normal topic. I gave them a chance. Do you want to go back to the normal topic, or do you want to keep talking about this? And they wanted to keep talking about it because it lights us up and gets us thinking in new ways.
Yeah.
As a teacher, that's what I try to do.
Do you think there's something big on the horizon that we're going to discover in terms of, I don't know, astronomy?
Yeah, I think this whole dark matter, dark energy thing is it's too big to. The answer has got to be something that more and more I think is going to be either absolutely nothing or completely change the whole picture.
I know a lot of like Nietzsche philosopher types that are pretty sure it's going to be absolutely nothing. But
I've got a good friend. His name is John, and he's a physics professor, and he's pretty convinced that dark matter doesn't exist. He's got it. Frankly, he said, after you look for 40 years for it, at some point you got to start saying, well, maybe it's not there. Maybe our theory is wrong. Maybe our ideas, the thing that's causing we think is, our ideas are wrong. Nature insists that we look and we look and we look for 40 years and it doesn't show up. At some point you got to say, okay, maybe our assumptions are wrong. So it could be nothing.
Okay. So setting that aside, why do you, can we talk dark matter for a minute?
Sure.
Stars and dark matter have a lot to do with each other. My understanding is it's referred to as dark matter because we just don't know what it is.
Right.
It's dark
we
not
cannot
because
detect it directly.
Yeah, with whatever we're using to detect it currently.
Yeah. Which would mean if it's an object, if it's a thing, if it's stuff, it's got to produce radiation of some sort. Light, radio waves, or infrared, or visible light, or gamma rays, something that we can detect if it's an actual physical thing.
Oh.
It's got to emit some light. It has to. Unless it's at absolute zero, and it's not going to be at absolute zero. Nothing in the universe is absolute zero. So it's got to be emitting something that we should be able to detect, and we haven't detected it yet.
Because the belief is that everything that is emanates some kind of light.
Right, what we call body heat, that we feel as heat off our bodies, that's just infrared light. We can't see it with our eyes, but it's just as real as the visible light that we see, and it's the same stuff. Our eyes just can't detect it. The wavelength is too long.
So is the assumption that our problem is that our detection system doesn't know how to detect this light? Or
it just may not be sensitive enough. Because everything that detects light has to have a certain sensitivity. and and below that we can't detect it. So the point is, it may not be sensitive enough. But we've got some pretty darn sensitive light catching devices orbiting the Earth and on the surface of the Earth, and none of them has detected it yet. So what we see is we see the effects of it. We don't see the thing itself. Kind of like if you imagine you're on a desert island somewhere and you see tiger tracks. Well, there's probably a tiger on the island. There's other theories, though. Maybe somebody went around with a big tiger print thing and faked it all. But the obvious conclusion is that there's actually a tiger on the island. Without ever having seen it, you've seen the effects of it. And that's kind of what dark matter is like. We see the effects of its mass, but we can't actually detect it directly.
And is there any other
going on for decades?
Are there any other theories about why it can't be detected other than?
Well, one thing is that, and this is the one thing that wouldn't actually produce light, is that maybe it is just a bunch of tiny particles like neutrinos or something.
Oh.
Just all kind of massed together. Any one of which you could ignore its mass, but when you clump, 10 to the 20th of them together, all of a sudden you've got something that, produces gravity. So something like that, but none of it's been directly detected yet.
And people who pay attention to this are pretty certain that it's not going to turn out to be, I don't know, like electromagnetism was to people in the 400s, that they just had no concept that it existed.
No, I think that, everything's on the table, but the problem is that everything that's on the table is sort of got to be consistent with what we think we already know. And so, there are always options outside of what we currently think we know, but any real proposal, I think, is going to depend on this being consistent with pretty well established science, and that limits the options. That limits the possibilities a lot.
Oh, I see.
See what I mean?
I do. Yeah.
It can't be inconsistent with what we believe to be basic physics. It could be. Maybe our basic physics is wrong, but
is that not the argument in the quantum physics and non-quantum physics world, that they're not consistent with each other, or do I not have that right?
They're not consistent. Quantum mechanics is perfectly consistent with like Newton's physics. Those are perfectly consistent. There's a bridge between them, and there's a way to go from one to the other.
Okay.
In fact, you can sort of derive Newtonian physics from quantum mechanics. You can start with quantum mechanics, and from that, derive Newton's physics. But there is an actual conflict between quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of relativity.
Oh.
That is an actual conflict. You've heard of string theory? I don't know if you've heard
of
string theory.
Oh, yeah.
That's an attempt to reconcile quantum mechanics on one hand and Einstein's relativity on the other.
So do you think we'll end up in 100 or 200 year period where that's happening with some explanation of dark matter, where someone has a theory?
It could be.
Like there's something not that they don't have to, people could think beyond the assumption of what's.
Yes, absolutely. It could happen, but it's not going to happen if we don't fund fundamental research. I can tell you that. Basic physics will just shrivel up and die, because basic physics has no immediate and practical application to it. But quantum mechanics, for example, quantum computing is one place where quantum mechanics may very well pay off huge in the practical market. Already working. I mean, they've gone a long way in the last few years on those quantum computers.
Do you think there's some chance that this quantum computers will be the solution to this dark matter problem?
I don't think so.
Is it not a computer problem?
This is a technical problem that is solved by using known properties of particles.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's not really. It's not fundamental research into the laws of physics. It's an application of the laws of physics.
Is there anyone in the dark matter working world that's really excited about this new data that has been made available from this?
Oh yeah. I'm sure that there are, and there may be connections. I can't see them off the top of my head. It's not really my area of research, but there are almost certainly connections between this big, huge data set that we have and dark matter. Maybe seeing, I told you that there's information in that data set about how the stars are moving.
Yeah.
Well, our galaxy is supposedly swamped in dark matter. So dark matter would affect, for example, the motions of these stars because it's massive. That's how we know it's there. It produces, it makes things move in ways they wouldn't move if it wasn't there.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Dark matter is definitely going to be affecting the motions of stars, and we'll see if this data set points, it could very easily point to the presence or absence of dark matter. Because contained in this data set is information about how these stars are actually moving.
I see. Man, it is so fascinating. As somebody who works in the people business, you think about how the human experience in a lot of ways is reflective on the movement of someone's life. That's really all you can see. You can't see into, I don't know, either the synapses of their brain or sort of the wellness of someone's soul.
Right.
But you can kind of see how it's going, you know, I mean, it's, and it's
absolutely.
So similar to that.
You can see it in their faces. You can see it in the actions they take and they don't take.
Yeah.
But you can't really see, it's like, those are like outward manifestations of their souls, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so dark matter, we think it's there. We see effects of it. We see its effects on other things, but dark matter itself is elusive. And, who knows how much longer it will stay that way. Or if one day we decide, nope, it just doesn't exist at all.
It kind of strikes me as obviously because I've laughed every time you've said that, this idea that there would just be a conclusion, didn't get enough data, just gone now. That I'm sure people do that, and we do that all in so many.
Yeah, well, one of the things that people who don't like science always say is that science is always changing, therefore how can we ever count on it?
Yeah.
Well, if we come out and say there is no dark matter, the naysayers will be like, oh yeah,
see,
look at you all,
right,
scientists.
Yeah. And is butter good for us or not good for us? Right.
Just tell us many glasses of red wine can I have in a day?
That's right. Okay, here's a really basic question on stars before we have to go. Why are there so many? Why? What's 200 billion, or what you could find 1.7 billion? That just seems to be a whole lot of organizing, a whole lot of replication. Why that? Because they're not ubiquitous. It's not, the whole sky is not filled as one bright light with all the stars. So they're not everywhere, but there's a lot of them. How do people think about that question?
Well, that question is answered, I think, by realizing two things. One is that there's a lot of stuff out there. So we could always ask where the stuff come from, just whatever.
Okay.
But also, stars have an upper limit on their size. They can't be larger than maybe 10 to 15 to 20 times the radius of the sun. Once they get beyond that large, they become unstable. They can't hold together. And so there's an upper limit on how big they can be. So if you start with so much stuff in the universe, and there's only an upper limit on how big stars can be, if you're going to have stars in the first place, then you have to have a lot of them.
I see. I mean? So it's just dealing with it's a ramification of all the stuff.
Right. Well, right. The amount of stuff. And number two, it is physically impossible to have a star the size of our galaxy. The laws of physics are such that you cannot have a star bigger than about 20 solar radii, or maybe 30, but something like that. In other words, there's an upper limit. You can't make a star bigger than a certain size.
Okay.
And so you got to have a lot of stars. If there's so much stuff and stars can only be so big, then you have to have a lot of them.
But there's a whole lot more space than there are stars.
Yeah. So I was telling my students today during class, if I've got a star about the size of a basketball, I live in Atlanta, so here in Atlanta, you have a basketball. The next closest star on that scale, if the sun is a basketball, then the next closest star is about the size of a softball, and it's in Honolulu.
Wow.
To get a sense of the space gap between stars. There's just enormous amounts of space there.
Is there something about a star that needs that space in between? Is that why there's...
No.
They could be right next to each other.
We kind of live in the galactic suburbs, so we don't live right in the middle of the galaxy. The density of stars is much higher there.
We live in the galactic suburbs.
Yeah,
it's
we're about half the way out.
It's a long commute.
We're not quite in the exurbs yet, but we're definitely in the suburbs. And out here, the density of stars is such that that's about average. The picture I just drew for you, the sun is a basketball in Atlanta, and the next closest star being a softball in Honolulu. That's about the average.
Wow. And if you get more into the center of the galaxy, do you get more density, more proximity of stars to each other?
Yeah. Yeah. If we orbited a star near the center of the galaxy, our night sky would be way brighter than it is.
All right. So
we could read our newspapers at night. Remember newspapers? We would be actually able to read those.
I do remember those. Why is there a center to the universe? Is that some black matter thing? Like, why is there?
There's a center to the galaxy.
Yeah, to the galaxy. Sorry.
There's no center to the universe.
Yeah, to the galaxy. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, there's a big black hole there.
I'm one of those universe people that still thinks of uni as one. Combining galaxies. Why is there a center to the galaxy? Like, what is that? Is that a black hole somewhere in there that everything else is orbiting? Like, are all things kind of orbiting around something? Is that what you kind of get to?
Yeah,
with there being
all
a center?
things. So basically, what you have a whole lot of stars packed in really close to that central black hole. That central black hole has a mass of several million suns.
Okay,
so it's big. And so you've got a lot of stars packed around that. Out where we are, we feel the gravity not only of the black hole, but of all the stars that are packed around it. So that's what we're orbiting. The sun orbits the center of the galaxy, and all those stars that are sort of compacted there, sort of like the central business district of a city. They're all packed in really tight.
Boy, now there's something I must have missed in 7th grade astronomy class. I understand that the moon orbits the Earth orbits the sun, that the sun is orbiting the
center of our galaxy. It takes about 250 million years to orbit once. It's called a galactic year.
Some days I feel like I've had a galactic year. That should be an expression people use. It's been like
250, and then the galaxy itself, the black hole and everything is moving in a certain direction towards a cluster of galaxies known as the Virgo cluster. So there's motion on top of motion on top of motion.
Okay, so I know I've asked this all the time. We do this. How do they know that? What's indicating if the sun is moving at such a pace that it's 275 million years for a galactic year, for a galactic year? We've been, keeping track for a couple of thousand, maybe.
Well, we've been keeping track of that only for maybe 100 years.
100 years. Like, what, so how confident, I guess, and how do we know that's?
Oh, actually, we're pretty confident of that. It's funny. I tell my astronomy students that it's really weird. We actually know the value of a galactic year better than we know, say, for example, where the moon came from.
Oh my God! See this is just the kind of mind-bending thing. Okay, so pretending that I'm a freshman student at St. Agnes, there, explain this to me. Why do we know that more about that than where the moon came from? I feel like people are all the time knowing where the moon came from.
Well, we have a pretty good theory, but it's not as certain as our knowledge of the galactic year. I'm trying to think of a good analogy. I don't have one. Suppose you're out in a field, okay, and you're walking in a circle around a post.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the post is the center of the galaxy, and you are the sun orbiting the center. Okay, so you're going to be doing a walk around that. If you move just a foot, then the angle between that post and some distant background object, like a mountain, will change.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at the
I can
post
see that.
and you're looking at the mountain. And when you move just a foot, the angle between that post and the mountain changes.
Yep.
And you can tell from that how long it would take you to go. If you knew the distance to the post, you could tell how long it would take to go around once. If you can measure that angle, if you take one step, the angle changes. So as we move around the sun, we don't want to move very far for us to be able to detect a difference in the angle between the center of the galaxy and some remote galaxy. The angle changes, and we can measure angles down to we could see a quarter placed on the moon.
Huh.
That's the kind of angle I'm talking about.
This is that moment where I think that Mr. Bancroft, my 6th grade teacher, was right when he said, some point you're going to want to know this stuff about geometry. I thought, when is this going to be? Am I ever going to want to know that?
Yeah. When is this? Yeah, we're never going to need to know this.
So So if we know the distance from here to the sun, and then you can tell the distance somehow to the center of the.
Well, now the distance to the center of the galaxy is a whole different thing. How we know that distance?
Yeah, how do we know that?
A whole separate ball of wax.
How do they know that? Just in a
It has to do with a couple things. One is a certain variable stars. Let me back up. Some stars, like the sun, are pretty constant in their brightness.
Okay,
that's good for us, right? We like the sun to be constant.
Yep.
But some stars are not. Some vary. Like, obviously. In fact, there's a very famous bright star that sometimes is not bright at all. It's a star called Mira. It's over near Orion. And for about several hundred days, you can see it. And for several hundred days, you can't see it because it drops below the limit of what our eyes can see.
Wow. That must really have freaked people out before they realized that there was a variance in the brightness of the stars when the stars disappearing and showing up.
Yeah. And it makes me wonder about the folks who insisted, 500 years ago and earlier, that the heavens never changed, that they were immutable.
Yeah.
But there's this one star that obviously is there sometime and obviously is not.
Mm-hmm.
So some stars are variable. And and some stars, there's a whole bunch of different kinds of variable stars, a whole bunch of them, different species of stars like this. For some of them, the length of time it takes to get bright and dim and bright and dim and bright and dim is related directly to their brightness, to their actual maximum brightness. So you can tell how bright they really are by seeing how long it takes for their brightness to change. And if you know the brightness of something, and that is if you know how many watts it really is, like think of like a light bulb. If you know how many watts it really is, and you know how bright it looks to you, you can tell how far away it is. Like a 40-watt light bulb.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Would look different than a 40-watt light bulb really close up.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can tell the distance to these stars because we know how bright they really, really are, what their wattage actually is.
Okay.
We can use those to clue us into the distance to the center of the galaxy.
Wow.
Through a couple of little winding paths, I'll skip just to.
Thank you. Yes, right. Yes,
to keep any listeners from eyes glazing over and.
Oh, it's amazing. Like the things we know and the things we don't. Like, not sure if there's really dark matter or not, but how long it takes for the sun to go around the center of a galaxy, we're pretty sure about that.
We're pretty sure about that.
That's the kind of imbalance, it seems to me, that can cause so much turmoil for people. Well,
that's the thing, is that it's all, you have to. Science is an ongoing project, it's people tend to think that it's like this, some people think of the Bible, it's like, God hand wrote it and then dropped it down onto the ground.
Yeah.
But we all know it didn't happen that way. It built up slowly over hundreds and hundreds of years. And science is the same way. It didn't just drop out of the sky. It took work. It took hundreds of years of careful, close observation and cross-checking and communicating and that sort of thing. And it's still going on. It's a process. It's not, a set of facts. Facts come and go. You can quote me on that.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the thing. There's this little phrase that's around a lot, and a set of other phrases that I like about science, and it is this kind of declaration that science is real. So like I have this little sticker that I've recently gotten that says something like "Science is real," "Black Lives Matter," "No human is illegal."
Oh yeah. We've got those around our neighborhood. Yeah,
love is love. Human rights are women's rights. I really like it, and this idea that science is real. I like that a lot. And the word "real" as opposed to "science is right" or something, right? Like that was an interesting choice.
Right. Right.
Because
science is not always right. You can look to the history of it and see that it's not always right.
Yeah. But it gets pitched that way, doesn't it? Like a lot of times when I'm in the religion field, so a lot of times for people, religion and science are in competition with each other.
Right.
As much for, I think, people on both sides. A lot of religious people think it's the enemy, and a lot of science people think religion is the enemy. And sometimes the idea that science is not always right, but it's real, is not something that everyone on the science side wants to fully acknowledge, right?
No, right. There are proselytizers for science as well as any others, and the simpler their message, the more people it reaches.
Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, build a wall. I mean, it's the simplest image you could come up with. The more simple the message is, the more people get it. Trump says build a wall, and everybody can see it, and everybody can either hate it or love it. But it doesn't require a lot of translation.
Right.
And so a lot of science proselytizers do the same thing and say, well, science is right, period. Without really being more subtle about it, because the subtleties, people are going to start looking away and changing the channel. We started saying, well, usually it's right, but if you really thought about it, you'd see, it doesn't really sell in the age of Twitter, it just doesn't. But it's true. It's real.
It's real.
That's true. I never thought of that. I've seen the signs, and I do like that because it is real. Whether or not it's always correct, it's always real.
Yeah.
Hey, it's now something real.
You're real too, my friend. Hey, so people in Minneapolis, they can come meet Paul Wallace in person, shake hands, be around you, have you sign their T-shirts.
Sure.
You're coming in town for a seminar for youth workers and youth leaders on faith and science.
That's right.
You've been running that boondoggle for a long time with Tony and
I have.
and the crowd.
Yeah, and this is the capstone event.
I've heard that.
The final blowout.
That's right.
Yeah.
The gravy train is coming to an end.
That's right.
But next week, the gravy train is rolling into town, and you and others will be here in Minneapolis, and people should go see that and participate in that event. Also over at Colonial Church in Edina. The title is Jesus. No, that's like the slogan. Jesus rode a dinosaur. Jesus
rode a dinosaur.
Yeah, and other myths and fables or something. And it's at scienceym.org. Would that be right?
Right.
I think I looked at that this morning, if I remember that right. And they can get registration information and all that. So.
And Krista Tippett will be there.
I heard that. Yeah. That's excellent. And a famous meteorologist here from the area.
Yeah. What's his name?
I think his name's Paul Douglas. I think that's who it is. Is it Paul Douglas that's going to be there?
I'm looking forward to meeting a meteorologist.
Really?
What Annie Dillard said? You know what Annie Dillard said about the weather? She said there are like 7 different categories of things that are worth talking about in this life, and one of them is the weather.
Really?
I completely agree with her. Yes.
Like you really like weather.
Yeah. And it's great. Of course, it's worth talking about. People always talking about the weather like it's nothing. I disagree with you, Doug. I disagree with that. I think it's totally worth talking about. Especially these days, right?
Well, I would love to be evangelized into that, because I feel like when people are talking about the weather, they're never talking about the weather. They're talking about them. They're talking about they're talking about themselves.
Aren't we all the time? Well, you've had some weird weather, right? You just dug out from under the snow, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
Is it still around? Is there any snow left at all?
There are still huge. Like, it's going to be, I don't know if the temperature is going to get there today, 80 degrees here or maybe 85. And
will it be the next week when
10 days ago it snowed. I would imagine this 80-degree day could really put a dent in it. But if you get on the north side of a tall building where there was a lot of snow piled up from snow removal that might be, a story or 2 stories high.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a frozen mountain of snow. And that stuff, the air temperature and even the infrared temperature of the sun might be high, but if the sun doesn't get to it, it creates its own little ecosystem of cold air.
A little climate.
Yeah, you walk by it and you just feel the cold. I'm a runner around these city lakes, and a number of our lakes still have ice on them, and it's like opening a refrigerator door when you move 10 feet closer to the lake and you feel the cold air. The sun will be hot to make you sweat, but the cold air coming off of the lake. I can't imagine how they can stay frozen. Just yesterday, they were still frozen. Some of these lakes.
And tomorrow is May.
Yes, that's a big thing around these parts. It's called ice out. So when the ice finally leaves I was at an airport and I heard a person. He was flying into Minneapolis. Yeah, we were all flying into Minneapolis, waiting to get on the airplane, and he was on the phone talking to someone about this snowstorm that was coming. So this is 2 weeks ago. So it's the middle of April, and he goes, "Oh, why doesn't somebody call that fucking Al Gore and tell him about this global warming?" Right. And it was everything I could do to just be like, "Are you kidding me right now?"
Like the guy who took the snowball into the House of Representatives, or remember that guy?
But
I don't remember who it was.
Yeah,
but it's the same mentality.
Same mentality. Yes, but and that's the weather and climate thing, and it's all a mess. So I don't know that it's weirder weather than it's ever been here. I don't know. I mean, this is a place where we're often reminded that our lakes exist because a gigantic glacier slid through and dug out all. So there's been some big shifts in this area for a long time, but people are making an awful lot of damage to the weather or to the climate now. It sure seems.
Sure seems.
At least the way I can. At least if you believe the people that I believe, it sure seems that way. All right, buddy. Hey, thanks so much for talking stars.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure, Doug. Hope to see you next week.
Yeah, let's make sure of that.
All right, you take care.
Okay. Hey, see you, buddy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.